Hi everyone, so today we're going to look at angles, how to convert between degrees and radians, how to find the coterminal angles, and how to determine the quadrant that the terminal side of an angle lies in. So in order to convert from degrees to radians and vice versa, we're going to multiply our number or our radians by either pi over 180 or 180 over pi. So let's first look at converting to radians. So we're going to try this without a calculator. Now remember, if you want to convert to radians, the goal is to get pi in your final answer. So our pi is in the numerator. We're going to take negative 20 and we're going to multiply by pi over 180. When we do that, what we can see is that we've got negative 20 pi over 180, and we can go ahead and simplify. So what we can do is we can cross out a 0, that is like dividing by 10, and you're going to get negative 2 pi over 18. And what you have here is you can say, all right, well, I know that negative 2 over 18 is the same thing as negative 1 over 9, which is the same thing as negative pi over 9. All right, so the second question we're going to go ahead and do is taking 250. So we're going to take 250, we're going to multiply by pi over 180. So when we do that, we've got 250 pi over 180. So we're going to cross out those zeros again, get us 25 pi over 18. So we're going to go ahead and see if we can reduce 25 over 18, which we cannot. So there's our final answer. Now, to go from radians to degrees, you're just going to flip that conversion factor. So your goal is, if you want degrees in your answer, you should not have a pi in your answer. So let's go ahead and multiply by 180 over pi. So doing so is going to cancel out those pi's, and it's also going to cancel out the zeros. So we have 18 over 3, which is the same thing as 6 degrees. All right, in our next example, same thing. Let's multiply by 180 over pi. So we're going to go ahead and cross out the pi's. You can go ahead and cross out a 0 from the top and the bottom. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to do 7 times 18 over 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, well, let's try to do this by hand because we're doing this without a calculator. So you can say, oh, I know that 18 divided by 2 is the same thing as 9 over 1. So when I multiply that, that gets me 63 degrees. Okay, when we look at coterminal angles, thinking about your keyword as co, they do have the same initial side and the same terminal side. So now what you're really thinking about is if you had an example of, let's say, 150 degrees. So here's 150 degrees. The coterminal angle of 150 would just be landing in the same spot, negative 210. So what we're doing is we're really saying I can either add or subtract any multiple of 360 or 2 pi, because what that would do is that ultimately shows that I can have one full rotation and then land in that same spot, or the same terminal side land in the same spot, which means that these angles would be coterminal angles. So how do we find this with either degrees or radians? So you're going to go ahead and add or subtract appropriately. So let's say for 80, I want to get a positive coterminal angle. I would take my 80 and I would add 360 to it, which would get me 440. So 440 is a positive coterminal angle to 80. And then if you want the negative, what you would just go ahead and do is you would take 80 and subtract 360. So to get the negative coterminal angle, I would do 80 minus 360, which gets me negative 280. So you have both a positive and a negative coterminal angle. Now, the thing you need to remember is that if you have pi, you're going to go ahead and add or subtract 2 pi to it. So now what you really need to think about is I need to add fractions, and you can't add fractions unless they have the same denominator. So if I look at this to get the same denominator, I'm going to multiply by 12. So I'm going to either add or subtract by 24 pi over 12. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take negative 7 pi over 12, and I'm going to add 24 pi over 12, which would get me 17 pi over 12. So I want one positive answer. So this is a positive answer, so I'm good there. And the next thing we want to do is we're going to say, okay, well, let's take negative 7 pi over 12 and let's subtract 24 pi over 12. So I want to get more negative, which would get me negative 31 pi over 12. So there's a negative coterminal angle. Okay, now our last question is going to be able to determine what the quadrant is in which the terminal side of this given angle is going to lie. So the thing that I want you to remember is that you might have to know some decimals of your radians. So first thing is first, what we're going to look at is we're going to say, okay, well, we know this is 0. We know this is pi over 2. We know this is pi or 1 pi. And this is 3 pi over 2. So let's go ahead and find the decimal. So you've got 0. You have 1.57. 1 pi is 3.14. 3 pi over 2 is 4.71. And then going all the way around to get you 2 pi, that's going to get you double the 3.14, which is 6.28. So in a question like this middle question of 3.5 radians, you're able to figure out where exactly this terminal side should land. So let's try that question first. So when I look at 3.5 radians, I'm looking at, all right, well, I'm starting off with my initial side, and I know that this is 3.14, and I know that this is 4.71. So if I'm looking for 3.5, I'm going to be on quadrant 3. Okay, if I want negative 5 pi over 12, right, we're always starting here at 0. So to go in the negative direction, again, this is 1 pi, right? This is 1 pi, which if it's over 12, this is negative 12 pi over 12, because 12 over 12 is 1. Now, half of that would get you a negative 6 pi over 12, because remember, when you're doing negative angles, you are counting backwards. You're going down and around. So to get negative 5 pi over 12, I know it got to be a little bit shorter, which would get me quadrant number 4. Okay, and last but not least, 11 pi over 4. Well, this is not an angle that's on our unit circle. So I know that I can actually subtract 2 pi, which would be the same thing as doing 11 pi over 4 and subtracting 8 pi over 4. Because remember, 2 pi, if I multiply by 4 over 4, would get me 8 pi over 4. This gets me 3 pi over 4, which is something I know is on my unit circle. 3 pi over 4, we know is going to land in quadrant number 2. But when you go ahead and draw your angle, you are thinking, okay, I got one full rotation around. That was the 2 pi, one full rotation. And then I'm going to land right in quadrant number 2 to get 11 pi over 4. All right, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to get future notifications on other pre-calculus videos. Thanks for watching and have a great day.